You're listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your hosts, Gary Kelley and Brad Avergon.
Coming back from the break, this is Gary Kelley with Brad Avergon, and we're talking about what we see in 2022. By the way, for those of you that are enjoying this show on radio, I have put candles all through my office in honor of the time of year. I don't know if that's a wise thing or something else. I don't know if I should expect to have people come down and sing, or if this is something that the fire marshal will come visit me and say, "What the heck were you thinking, pal?"
Gary, I promise you that while we're doing the show, that if your place starts to burst into flames behind you, I will let you know that.
Thank you. That would be very nice. If it starts to burst into flame, that means that the batteries have overheated. So we were talking about interest rates, and we were talking about the person that's been living in the house for decades and an apartment for decades, and they've been paying $800 a month for a 2-bed, and their landlord has sold their home, and now they need to find a place to live and their ability to do that. And Brad, you had a point you wanted to make it coming out of that.
Yeah, so I got to be honest, Gary, if you're living in a 2-bedroom apartment and for $800 a month, God bless you, hang on to that as long as you can, but don't expect that it's going to be, continue infinitum, because that's not what I'm seeing, Gary. I'm seeing rents come across right now anywhere from, I guess for a 2-bedroom, $1,800 a month to $2,500 a month, depending on where it is. And so when you start to get into those type of rent numbers, it's very easy to kind of draw an analogy to, well, what would that buy me in a home? If I were buying a home, what would that be? And I will tell you that people are surprised sometimes that a home is not as much money as they thought. Purchasing a home is not as much money on a monthly basis as they thought it might be. And perhaps it's close to what they were paying for rent, maybe a little bit more. And yet they start paying their own, mortgage down. They start paying their own mortgage down, which is a great place to be. What are you seeing, Gary?
Well, I'd see people that are out trying to find a home, and if they haven't been in the mindset of needing to buy a home, they may not have the down payment together. And if they need a zero down mortgage product, you start to talk about, were you in the military, VA, is there some kind of a disability involved? And that's where I think it's important that the real estate agent understands the situation and partners with a loan officer such as yourself, who has a keen sense of what the loan programs are. There are 0% down programs still in the marketplace. And there are folks that just flat out need it. Otherwise, it's time to start saving some money. It's time to stop buying Starbucks and start putting that money aside and saving. And people say to me, it's harder than you think. I've had to do it myself. I understand, but I don't think that going to Dunkin' as opposed to Starbucks is the end of the world. And I don't think that you need a new car every year. Maybe you get a new car every couple of years and you use the difference to start to save some money. That's how people save money, or they do the friends and family route to get money. All kinds of different ways to do it, but it's all comes back to, if you're going to buy a house, typically going to need to have some money down.
I agree. And I think you bring up a great point, which is the earlier that folks begin having those conversations with someone like myself is very, very important. It's not like I'm not going to talk to somebody if they're not ready to buy immediately, or that you're not going to talk to them if they're not ready to buy immediately. But having a plan of action to be able to set up a goal, set up a path to get there, maybe 6 months or 12 months or even 24 months from now, is very, very important. What a lot of folks don't realize is there's not just the VA program, which is a great program, by the way, but for folks that we're not necessarily in the service, there's other programs. FHA allows a 3.5% down payment where the 3.5% can be all gift. So sometimes if you've got a grandparent or a parent or a sister or a brother who is willing to help out, you can get that 3.5% down payment, and then we can either build it into seller financing or we can build in lender paid closing costs. So we can actually get somebody into a home when they don't have that much, that much money to work with, but they have that basic nucleus that you need to kind of get started. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is, and I've had this conversation very recently with a number of clients, is that most corporate 401k programs will allow you to borrow up to 50% of the amount that you have vested in your 401k from yourself. Now, what they get confused sometimes is the difference between a 401k loan and a 401k withdrawal. 401k withdrawal, when you take that money out and you withdraw it, you have an IRS penalty. It's not necessarily a great thing. Sometimes you have to do it, but we try to steer away from that. We don't want to pull people's retirement funds. But a 401k loan allows them, if they've got 50,000, let's say, in a 401k, most programs allow them to borrow up to $25,000 on that from themselves at a very nominal rate. And more importantly, we don't debt them for that because they're borrowing from an asset that they own. And so it's a great way to go and free up some cash and enable them. Maybe that 25,000 will help them. That'll be that 3% or 5% that they need to put down on a home. So those types of things come from conversations that I have with folks early on. And as you said, cutting back on the Starbucks, I have those conversations sometimes when I'm talking to folks. Look at how much could you save if you needed to right off the bat. How much could you save on a monthly basis? Why don't we set that as a goal? Let's put a plan together and check in periodically and see how it's going. But there are programs out there, Gary. There are definitely programs out there. And I encourage people, the earlier they have those conversations with someone like you, where you can connect them, or someone like me, I think that's great. What are you seeing as far as, in the market, when you're presenting an offer for a buyer that's coming in with a low down payment? Is there some things that you're seeing that you're able to do to kind of guide folks as far as what to look at, what not to look at, or maybe even from a selling standpoint when you're the listing agent?
Well, what we do is we always have a conversation with the listing agent and say, what are those key things for the buyers? And you often can find out a lot of information by doing that. Let's say that the buyer is in the middle of trying to buy, the seller is in the middle of trying to buy another property. They may have a date that they're trying to hit, and that becomes the important thing to them, is focusing on that date. Others may want to be out of state by a certain time frame. As we look at the end of the year, some folks want to be out before the snow flies. Well, they may not have achieved it this year, but we didn't get that much snow so far. So, that's an important thing. Some folks, they don't really care. It's just, what's the best thing that you can do for me? I want the most money I can get. So everyone has a different motivation. So you try to understand what those motivations are. And then you look at it and say, from the offer perspective, how much activity has been on the house? How are there other offers out there? And then, what are the levers you can pull? Obviously, the dollar amount of the offer is a lever that can be pulled. The time frame to close is a lever that can be pulled. Are you going to do an inspection? Is another lever that can be pulled. I like to have people do inspections so that they know what they're buying. But a lot of times the sellers don't want to hear about an inspection because they are concerned about that being just a bottomless pit of money. There's a couple of ways to deal with that. You can do the inspection after the purchase and sale is signed, which in theory means that you're not going to get back out of the deal. That's a way to still learn more about the house and not have your first night there be the one where you find out that you got a leaky roof. Those kinds of things. That's the kind of stuff that we try to help our buyers position their offer in the most favorable light as what the sellers are going to be looking at.
I think that's so important, Gary, and I think the guidance that you give them is key because from the buyer's standpoint, they've maybe gone and they've gotten a pre-approval from a lender, but they don't necessarily know what's going on the other side of that transaction. They're not necessarily aware. So by asking those probing questions from the listing side, the chances of your buyer getting that offer accepted are much greater because you can custom tailor that offer to that. And I think that can make the difference between, especially with somebody going in with an offer with a lower down payment, not coming in with 20 or 50% down. It can make the difference between that offer being accepted or not. And that's an intangible that I think a lot of buyers don't necessarily understand. The other thing is that there's a big, especially with online lending now, buyers will go and get pre-approved from an online lender, and they see this pre-approval letter, and then they go around with it, and they don't understand that there's differences in the counties. So, for example, if you're in Worcester County versus you're in Middlesex County in Massachusetts, there's a big difference between what the loan amount is. So if they got their pre-approval and they were looking in one town, and now they moved even sometimes one town over, that pre-approval may no longer be valid, and they wouldn't necessarily know that. It doesn't necessarily state it right on the pre-approval. Oh, you have to be in county X in order to get make this pre-approval valid. It is no longer in county Y. And so again, that personal guidance that is very, very key.
So Brad, we're at the end of this show. It's the last show of the year. I have folks I want to thank. I want to thank you for coming out once a month and playing in the sandbox. And if those of you that have been listening haven't figured it out, Brad and I are friends and we talk to each other. I'm not going to say every day, but pretty darn close. I also want to thank my colleague Sue, who puts up with me doing this and gives me the space to do it. I want to thank Ted A. Ted A is the chief engineer at the radio station. He takes our crap and makes it sound good, and I appreciate what he does. Keith is another key resource. We do make video from this, and Keith makes the video look acceptable, actually better than acceptable. So I want to thank Keith. I'm sure that there are others. Brad, who would you like to thank?
I actually want to thank our listeners and our viewers, Gary. Without you guys, I mean, it's fun for Gary and I to connect, but without you guys, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So thank you for that. It's been a good year, especially considering all the crazy things that went on for Gary and for I. And so we want to thank you, and also want to encourage you. If you have questions that are on your mind, please feel free to send them to us either via email, or you can, or if it's on Facebook or LinkedIn, you can message us and let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you like about the show. Let us know what you'd like to, if you have questions, let us know what's on your mind, and we'd be happy to answer it. Other than that, have a great holiday, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Brad. Take care.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.